Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Today, we're going to be talking about identity shifts, personal transformation, and how to become a match for the results that we want in life. So, I'm calling this series of videos Close the Gap. And here we are closing the gap between who we are and who we want to be. And we're doing that because who we are determines what our circumstances are. Who we are determines what we attract into our lives, who we attract into our lives. So, really working on our identity and shifting our identity and expanding our identity is what can create the shifts in our lives that we really, really want. So, what people tend to do is that they focus on, I want to have these things. And in order to have these things, I need to do those things here, right? So, in order to have something, I need to take action that is aligned with achieving those things. And that works really great usually for as long as your willpower or motivation lasts, which for some people is a long time and other people not so much. Me personally, my willpower can keep me going from anywhere between 3 minutes and 3 weeks, I would say, depending on what it is. For people who can do that, you see people all the time, they're able to just push through and push and push and push, and they're working and they're hustling and they're struggling, and then they achieve results and they're great. But I also have a feeling that they're pretty miserable doing it. And I am not about having a miserable life, right? We're not here to live miserably. We're here to live joyfully and excitedly and happily. So, my approach to transformation is you look at what you want to have, still the same thing. You look at what do you need to do, still the same thing. But we focus on who do we need to become to create these, to take these actions effortlessly, to just be the person who does the thing, right? How do I become the person who automatically takes the action that creates the outcome that I want? And also because there's an energetic thing to it, right? When we show up in the energy of I am this person, things just tend to happen, right? I don't know if you've ever tried this, but you start working on yourself and you feel deserving and you feel amazing and you step into your royalty vibe and you become this person, and without even taking even less action that you used to in order to create a result, now all of a sudden things are just happening. Things are manifesting, things are attracting, and things just happen more smoothly. So how can we become the person that takes the action, the only necessary action? Also, sometimes if we don't align our person with our actions, we tend to overdo the action because we think the importance is in the action. The important part is not the action. The important part is the being. Now, action is, of course, also required. We won't, have the most amazing life that we ever want by sitting on the couch watching Netflix and eating ice cream all day, however wonderful that would be, right? There needs to be a level of action. But how do you become the person who just automatically takes the action and creates this incredible, beautiful life that we want? So the first thing, I hope that if you're with me so far, let me know in the chats. If I'm not making any sense, let me know in the chats, because you're here and I absolutely love having you here. So how do we now become the person who can do the thing? Well, first of all, we need to be aware of who are we now? What is the person that I am now? What kind of circumstances and what situation have I created for myself? And a lot of people would say, I didn't create these circumstances. Well, you did, to some extent. Obviously, there's things that you can't change, but whatever you accept into your life is an action that you took, okay? And that's going to be a little bit harsh for some people. And also, obviously, let's not talk about, war and crimes and stuff like that. We're talking about a life where there's some level of external balance, and you have this, and you're going to be mentioning all of these reasons and excuses for why your life looks the way that it does, right? You attracted it, you were a match to it, you accepted it, and you didn't change it. And the thing about not changing it is that you don't change it is also an action. You accepting status quo is an action, okay? So whatever circumstances and situation you are in says something about who you are as a person. How do you engage with the people around you? It says a lot about who you are as a person. So we want to get really deep into who am I? Who is this identity that I've created? What are the circumstances that I've created? And then we look at, what do I want my circumstances to be? What are they now and what do I want them to be? And we get really, really clear on what do we want these circumstances to be? And now you have what I call the gap, right? This is where I'm now. This is where I want to be. How do I close it? And we focus on the identity. What is the identity of me where I am now? What is the identity of the person that I want to be, who can create these circumstances, these updated new circumstances for me? And now, how can I start stepping into this person that I want to be? This includes, how do I think? What are my beliefs? What kind of people do I hang out with? How do I spend my time? What skills am I developing? What am I doing for fun? Right? What you're doing for fun actually has a lot to say about who you are as a person. Do you like to just completely distract yourself at all times? I love distractions just as much as the next person. But I've also become aware of the fact that the more time and energy I spend on distracting myself, the further away I am from the person that I want to be. Because distraction takes away time that you could be using on closing the gap. So, some examples. As you may know, I was born and I grew up in Denmark. And I was not, Denmark is fine. It's a great place. I was not the biggest fan of Denmark. Denmark is very cold and dark most of the time. So, and I didn't really like the way that people talk about life there. There's a very set box for what are you supposed to do with your life. And if you want to move outside of that, you get a lot of resistance from people around you. There's not a lot of support to go out and do crazy things. Okay, and I wasn't really a big fan of that. I didn't feel at home, even though I had lived my entire life there. So I knew that I wanted to leave. I knew I wanted something bigger, something different. And meanwhile, I was terrified of leaving. I was absolutely terrified of leaving. I couldn't even go travel for longer periods of time with my friends. I was supposed to go on a 5-week trip to China with my friends from school during my time at business school. And I went back home after 10 days. I literally left early because I just couldn't. I was just too scared all the time for no reason at all. I was just anxious. I was constantly anxious. So I had to go back home. And it was very, very clear to me that if I wanted to leave Denmark and actually move to another place, spoiler alert, I did. I live here in Rwanda now. But I knew that if I wanted to make that shift from living in Denmark to living pretty much anywhere else, right? Anywhere else that wasn't as cold and as dark, I knew I had to change. I knew I had to become the person who was not constantly driven by fears and anxieties, okay? So how do you fix that? How do you now become a non-scared, non-anxious person? Can I get some comments in the chat if you've ever dealt with fears or anxieties and you're just I have no idea how to deal with this. I don't know what to do about it. I had no idea what to do about it because it was very clear to me that even just the thought of going somewhere, as soon as I started working on or started thinking about, let me go travel for longer periods of time, I'll get really excited and then things start getting real and I would get extremely anxious and I would find whatever reason or whatever I could to get out of that situation. So how do you now stop being scared? How do you stop being that person? It is terrifying, right? You have to literally let go of that part of you who's scared and anxious and then start growing into someone who's not. And one thing that I did is I did a lot of personal exposure therapy. I would probably not have called it that back then, but that's what I did. I started exposing myself to things that I was scared of. And one way that I found out that that worked is that I got a gig. I had a project I was doing. Dogs are saying hi. I had a project I did at the Faroe Islands, which is a couple of hours flight from Copenhagen, where I lived. And to do that project, I stayed there most of the time, but I traveled back a couple of times per month, once to twice per month. And at that time, I was terrified of even flying, right? I wasn't only scared of being away from Denmark, I was terrified of getting into a plane and flying. And what happened is that during that period of time, because I had to travel a lot and move a lot, I got so much exposure to flying that in the end, in the beginning, I was just every single time I was on a plane, I was so scared. And then towards the end, I was like, it's just, another time. It's the same when you learn driving, right? I relatively recently got my driver's license. And when I tell people, they're like, what, you've never driven a car before? I had never driven a car before I took my license here, okay, ever. And I have a tendency to get still sometimes quite anxious when I'm driving. And I know that this comes with exposure. I just have to keep driving and driving and driving. The same way that I had to keep flying and flying and flying. The same way that I had to, when I was terrified of spiders, go hang out with the spiders, right? I mean, they're not dangerous, the ones that I had exposure to. But still, I was terrified of these little spiders. And I just had to go and spend some time with them in order to shake this fear that I had. So what I did is that every single time I noticed, okay, here's something that I'm scared of, I just kind of forced myself to do it and to analyze it when I was in it and to work on what my thoughts were when I was doing it. I was even socially anxious. I had so many issues being around other human beings. And I had to really think about, what is it about meeting new people that scares me so much? And it eventually, this is all about always coming down to the root of it. It eventually came down to the fact that I was so certain that they had negative thoughts about me that I would just be really anxious because I was projecting all of my personal insecurities that I had through them onto me. Oh, they're going to think I'm this. They're going to think I'm that. And when you're constantly worried that other people think negatively of you and you start thinking about all the things that you dislike about yourself, and that at that time, that was a lot of stuff I didn't like about myself. And I thought that they could see all of it. It was just so triggering because imagine being so anxious all the time. You just keep being faced with your own personal insecurities. So in order for me to really get over that, I had to just change my thoughts as they came. Instead of assuming people are not going to like me when the second that they meet me, they're going to dislike me, right? That was the thoughts that I was having. I had to change those thoughts. I had to be like, oh, this is such a cool person. How amazing it is for me that I get to meet someone new who's really cool. And then stop thinking about, what are they going to think about me? What are they going to think about me? So there's a lot. I've done a lot of work on fears, anxieties, insecurities, among other reasons, because yes, I knew that I had to let go of my fears of traveling and being away from home if I wanted to go and live in another country. But there are so many other things associated with being the person that I wanted to be that was not a match to the person that I was. So the more that you can put thoughts into, this is the person I want to be. How do they get up in the morning? How do they act? How do they talk? Who do they talk to? How do they spend their time? How do they not spend their time? It's also a really big thing, right? How can I become more like that than the person I am now? And I know that there's a lot of people who's going to talk about, oh, but if you want to change, then you're going to change into someone who is not authentically you, right? We think that because of all of these insecurities and fears and the guilt and the shame and all of these negative, hard things that we feel and think, we think that is who we are. And then all the amazing things that we are, we have a feeling that that's not us, right? You're like, oh, but that's the person that I'm like fronting. That's the mask that I put on. But the thing is, we are just as much all of the amazing things that we are now and that we're going to be, as much, if not more, than all of the negative things that we associate ourselves with. Because who we are, if we haven't done a lot of personal development work, who we are has been programmed by somebody else. Either it's been done directly by teaching us things. It can be like our teachers, our caretakers, our uncles and aunties and people we grew up with in magazines and social media. They're conditioning us to think specific things about the world, about ourselves, about others. And when we fall into that, we create this program that teaches us everything we know about what is true. And that includes the thoughts we have about ourselves, the ideas we have about when are we good enough and when are we not, everything that feeds into feelings of shame and guilt. All of that is programmed, right? But then when we do personal development, what we do is that we start dismantling all of these things that doesn't sit right with us. All of these things that we don't want to cling on to, all of these negative feelings, all of these extra feelings that we just need to release them, right? So that we can feel good and we can feel amazing. We can do amazing things. And we show up despite our fears, and we show up despite our doubts, and we show up despite our insecurities, so we can prove to ourselves that we can be this amazing person. And some people are like, I'm faking it till I make it. You're not faking it. You're just acting like your future self a little bit earlier, right? That is still you, still who you are. Because if you desire to be that person, then there's part of you that is connected to that person. It's the same if you do like these, I don't know if you've ever done meditations around connecting to your higher self, right? You kind of visualize the most amazing version of you, and then you're just like soaking it in, right? You're just soaking up that energy of that person. That person is still you. Is this the person you haven't really become that person yet? But that person is so much more the authentic version of you, because that's who you really desire to be. And that desire is way more authentic than the programming that other people have put into you, right? Do you agree? Can I see some? Are you with me still? Are you getting what I'm saying? Are you totally in for stepping into this future version of you? I would love to see it in the chat. Yes, good to see that. So when you sit and you do the work, the the hard truth for sure, but it's a good truth, right? It's a great truth. Because the thing is also, if we base our actions and our sense of identity on what other people think of us or other people think that we should be, then there's a disconnect. And also, it removes our ability to really do something about it, right? If everything that is important to us is up to somebody else, or if everything that is important to us has been programmed by somebody else, then we are not in control of that. We really need to know this exactly. Then we are not in control of that. So what we can do instead is that we take charge of our identity. We decide who we want to be and who we're going to become, and we're going to let go of all the things that we don't like. All of these negative feelings and all of these victimhoods and all of these guilt and shame and doubts and insecurities, we drop them, we release them, and we move into the person that we want to be. That higher level version who can achieve all the amazing things that we want in life. And when we do that, now we're in control. Now we get to decide who we're going to be, and we're not going to let ourselves be defined by what other people think of us or other people think we should be. I don't know if you've ever tried this where you meet people that you haven't seen for a really long time, and you already feel like, I feel myself stepping into who I was back then, like a high school reunion or something, You meet these people and you're like, oh, all of these people think I'm this person that I was back then. And it almost feels like icky, right? Because you've grown so much and you've changed since then. That's not who you are anymore. And then that identity it's put into the hands of other people. Now, instead, you show up like the person that you know you want to be, right? Sometimes we just got to shed a lot of people like, you know what? I just keep stepping into an old identity around you. And right now, I need some space to grow into this person that I want to be. And that's not your fault. It's all on me. But I need some space so that I can grow and I can flourish. And this is who I'm getting, who I'm becoming. And we take control of that identity shift. And we do that by making a decision to be that. So I have a lot of things these days that I'm shifting because I've realized, wow, I didn't even know that this was still something I was carrying around. So I'm still finding insecurities and self-doubt and all of these things not necessarily in terms of thoughts, but in terms of feelings. Have you ever tried that feeling where you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do this thing and it's gonna be amazing, and there's this feeling inside that's like, are you sure? You're gonna totally fail, right? You're gonna totally fail in this. You tried it before, it didn't work. What makes you think it's gonna work this time, right? I still get them. It's way more of a feeling. It's the feeling of, if I had said those things to myself. I'm really paying a lot of attention to the words that I'm using, and I'm really, really lucky to have people in my life who will call me out when I say things that is not aligned with the person that I know I want to be. So that is such a blessing. Get those people in your life. It's like a life hack. Get people in your life who can call you out. It's so good. But you can still carry around the feelings of doubt and insecurities and all these things. And I was like, you know what? I'm not this person anymore. That is not who I'm going to be. So I'm going to step into this different energy person who's not going to be run by doubts and fears and insecurities. And I did like a lot of work of finding out why. Why am I feeling these things? Why am I not feeling good enough? Why am I feeling insecure? And I would trace it back to childhood things, oh, my dad told me this when I was a kid, or my mom said that. And it's such a victimhood mentality. It's such a victim saying, oh, this is who I am because of, this happened to me 25 years ago. Yeah, but I decided to stay that person. I decided whether or not it was conscious or subconscious. I decided to keep having those insecurities and those self-doubts and all of those feelings. I decided to keep them, and I decided to keep running my life based on them. Even if I I'm gonna try this. I don't have you ever tried I'm gonna do this new thing, and you're kind of, instead of running towards it, you're gonna be like, I'm just gonna tap my toe in that direction and see how that feels. And if it doesn't feel good, I'm gonna just go right back to where I came from, right? And sometimes you're like, oh, I tried my all. And that's when you need people in your life who say, no, you didn't. You tapped a toe onto the path. You did not run in that direction. So what are you still carrying around that is not aligned with your new identity? Whether it's thoughts, maybe it's just feelings, maybe it's just a sense, or you're like telling yourself, not now, right? No, now is not a good time. Oh, all of these things need to be perfect before I'm ready to go in that direction. Well, guess what? If that's the case, nothing will ever be perfect, so nothing will ever change. So if you want to change, if you want to step into this person, if you want to step into this identity, you have to do it even, especially when you're scared, especially when you're feeling doubts, and just do it anyway and trust yourself anyway and tell yourself, I am not going to carry around these doubts. I'm going to acknowledge that they're there and then release them and throw them somewhere they belong. It's definitely not here in my decision-making process. It's definitely not here in my embodiment process. And the faster we are to cast away all of these things that are holding us back and sticking to our identity, the faster we are at identifying them and releasing them, the faster we can move on and step into our new identity. So I really love using this example with overeating. I've been such an overeater most of my life. Just like, oh, I'm going to finish this food real quick kind of person. And I'll end up eating way too much food, and I'll end up being totally stuffed. And that was just who I was. I would just eat a lot of food. And I had just kind of accepted that as someone that I was. And then I just decided one day to the other, not who I am. So now I don't overeat anymore. And I was very intentional and paid a lot of attention for a period of time. And then I had like one slip up because I forgot that I was no longer an overeater, right? As your success and failure kind of go hand in hand. You gotta bounce back once in a while. And I did, just to realize how much I really hated it. And it was such a great learning experience for me to hate that feeling of feeling so overly full, because then I realized, it's no longer part of my identity, right? We can keep telling ourselves, this is not who I am. You do the intention and the attention, and you change. And then at some point, you're like, is it still in me? Do I still have it? Is it like still part of kind of who I am? Is it hidden somewhere? And I just got the confirmation that is nowhere to be found anymore. That is no longer who I am. And it's the same in any other change that you want to do in your life. You make the intention, you pay attention to what needs to change, and you put in the intention to start living as your new self. and you start applying it. And as soon as something pops in that's aligned with your old identity, you release it. You're like, oh, that's not me anymore. Bye, Felicia. And you start moving into your new identity, right? And once you start moving into your new identity and you start living in that identity, it becomes more and more who you are. And yes, there's going to be some slip ups once in a while. And the more slip ups, the longer you go without slip ups and they kind of bounce back into your life, the more you're going to realize that that's no longer who you are. So you just start closing these gaps. You close the gaps between where you are and who you want to be. And then once you start becoming the person that you want to be, you see things aligning, right? That's how I did. When I first started coaching, I did not know how to charge any prices, right? I started just like coaching a lot of people and was like, like forcing my best friends, like, I'm gonna come coach you once per week. And he was like, okay. and I started doing it, I started getting the experience. And it took a while for me before I could even charge anything. And when I started charging, it was something like $50 per session, right? I would change people's lives with one session and I would charge like $50. And I got into like, okay, now this really needs to change because this will just not be sustainable. And within a month, I went from charging, like closing $50 on a client to closing $3,000 on a client in less than a month. I had never charged anyone $3,000 like outside of being paid a salary, obviously. I'd never closed that kind of money before. And the only thing that had to change was how I saw myself, how I showed up, how I saw my own value, and how I communicated it. And talking about the things that I know that I can do and the changes that I know that I can make. And if someone were to come to me and be like, hey, I want to offer you $50 for a coaching session, I would be like, interesting. Yeah, go find someone else. That's just not where we're at, right? So when you start being able to embody higher prices and you really understand the value of what you're bringing. I had a session with a guy and he went out and closed like a government contract and he was like, your session made me like $500,000. I was like, why would I charge $50 for that, right? It doesn't make any sense. So you keep proving to yourself, I can do this, I can step into this is the person that I want to be, and you start expanding and growing into it. And there's so many different areas in life that you can do this. You can do this with your health, you can do this with your sleep, you can do this with your friends, like in terms of what kind of friends do I want to hang out with? What kind of relationships do I want to have? You can do this with partners, with spouses. You can do it with your business, with your career. It's like if you want to be promoted in your job, start being the person who's already doing the things. Start showing that you can take that level of responsibility by doing it, right? Start showing initiative. Start showing up as the person who's already acting out from your next level. And that's what you do in all areas of life. If you want your clients to pay you more, start already now, providing so much more value that when they come and they want to renew a contract or something, you're like, yep, prices went up because you got all of this, and they're still gonna want to say yes because they know the value that you bring to the table. So if you really focus on becoming this high integrity, high value, incredible person that you yourself love, right? The one that you love yourself so much. I used to hate myself so much. Like, I don't even have words for it. I used to hate myself so much. And this week, my partner came to me. He was like, you know what? I love how much you love yourself. And I was like, me too. Life is so much cooler when you love yourself. Life is so much more joyful and happy and amazing when you love yourself, right? So how can you step into that person? Okay. I feel like I've talked a lot about closing gaps, about identity shifts, about transformations. Anyone have any questions? Please put them in the chat. Any comments? Please don't let the question come after I stop the recording, because then we're going to miss out on all this awesomeness and we're not going to have it recorded. Or if you have any comments about what you liked about this session, it would be really useful. Any suggestions for future topics? Also, remember to go watch my masterclass. I have the link on my Instagram. It's free until Friday. It's about how I did my physical transformation. So losing those, I don't know, 25 kilos or whatever, getting into the shape of my life in my cute age of 36 for the first time. Um, yeah, nothing. It's okay, you don't have to say anything. You don't need to have any questions. If you do have questions, you can always email me. I would be very happy to bring it up in future recordings, future calls. And if there's nothing there, okay. Well, thank you so much for today. Definitely got me fired up from, ooh, how do you maintain your identity? That is such a good question. Maintenance is, it comes with the attention and the intention, right? So when you shift your identity, you need to be very much aware of how you're acting and how you're showing up. You're paying attention to, okay, this is the part of my old identity that I want to change. And you start really acting differently, right? You start acting differently. And then as you do that, it becomes more and more part of who you are. It becomes more and more natural. And if it doesn't become natural, it's because there's something in you that has not been healed. There is something in you that is still calling out on your old identity that you're not seeing. So if you have, let's say, if it's an insecurity that you want to let go of, maybe you haven't figured out what is it actually that makes you insecure. So it really depends on where you are in your personal development journey. People who have spent a lot of time on personal development are very good at simply just identifying, accepting, changing, and running with it because they've done it so many times. If you are still relatively new or if you haven't done a lot of identity shifts, it can be really important to go and figure out, why did I become that person? What was it that created this type of insecurity? What was it? And it's very often a childhood thing, right? It was something that your parents told you or your teachers, they kind of treated you in a specific type of way, or you're typecasted as the one who would never achieve anything, or whatever it is. There was a belief around you that was internalized either by people telling you directly, or they were kind of acting out in a way that made you conclude that that must be because you're not worthy, or because whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that created that old part of your identity, you want to figure out how did it get there? How did I become this person? Because once you can see that, you see that that had nothing to actually do with you. It had to do with other people's perception of you. It had to do with how other people acted. It might not even have been, and like, it maybe not have had anything to do with you, right? There's so many people in our lives that do things, and if they're important to us, we're gonna think that, oh, they're doing this because of me. I don't know if you've ever, like, kids, for example, and their parents get divorced, they're like, oh, they're getting divorced because of me, right? They're carrying around all of this guilt and all of these ideas around why things are happening. But a divorce is very rarely because of the kids. So if you, okay, dogs came in. So if you are carrying around something that manifested a feeling or a belief or an idea or a thought in your identity, you want to go and figure out what was it that created that, and really sit with it and feel it. Allow yourself to feel it. The thing is also, it's very hard to create identity shifts if we don't allow ourselves to feel our feelings. Because if you don't allow yourself to feel our feelings, then those feelings will be stuck somewhere. They're not disappearing anywhere, right? Our feelings release when we allow us to feel them. So if there's something that you need to cry about, you go cry about it, right? Go home and cry about it. And at some point, you're done crying. And when you're done crying, now you can release it. Now you don't have to carry those around. Now, the longer you've carried it around, the more you're probably going to need some crying. Or if you've already done a lot of transformation and identity shifts, you make the decision, this is dealt with. It's okay, I've released it. This is not part of who I am anymore. You don't necessarily need to go and identify, where did that come from? Sometimes we just gotta see it and we're like, okay, I see how this is controlling my life. I'm not gonna let it control my life. So with the overeating, for example, I just decided, though obviously beforehand I had done a lot of thoughts about how did it get there. And I would blame those situations. I would be like, oh, it's all of y'all's fault. It has nothing to do with me. Now I'm just this whole adult who's gonna continue to overeat because this is just who I am. Well, you can decide it's not who you are anymore, and you step into your new person. So it really depends. If you're not able to maintain your new identity, then go back and figure out what is it that keeps pulling you back to your old identity. It's very often also a fear of letting go of who you know. You've known this version of you for however long you're alive, right? You know this version of you so well. Now you're trying to jump into somebody else. That can be really scary because you don't jump into somebody else without letting go of who you are. So there's a fear in transformation sometimes that you need to release, and you need to be okay with letting go of that part of you. We want to cling on to our comfort so much. Even though it can be extremely uncomfortable to be the person we are, we want to cling on to that discomfort because the fear of the unknown is overpowering. So it's really about figuring out, okay, who am I? What do I need to release? Who do I need to become? Start becoming that person. And if you feel like there's constantly something pulling you back, you got to figure out what that is. You got to figure out why it's still pulling you. So yeah, it really depends. Therapy is always good. Coaching is always good. Talking these things through with people who can see us from the outside. The cool thing about getting help from either coaches or therapists or mentors is that they can see the things that we can't. They can see our blind spots because we have only ever been ourselves. So we don't really realize what is not normal, right? What about whatever I'm feeling and thinking and reacting to and the thoughts and the beliefs and everything? We just think, oh, that's how everybody is. Nothing is about how everybody is, right? There's so many things that are different. There's so many ways that we react and respond and the assumptions we make and the judgments that we make that differ from people to people, from person to person. So figuring out someone who can help you see those blind spots is really useful. If you can't see it yourself, then go find someone who can help you. I hope that helps. If you have any other questions, or if that wasn't elaborate enough, if you want more details, if there's anything that you're still in doubt about, if there's anything you want to share about this session, something you think was really cool, if there's something you didn't understand, any other questions, I keep it open for another minute or so. And if not, we're going to close down for today. And then we're going to talk next week even more about how to close the gap. So I really want to use these sessions to take different perspectives in terms of identity change and closing these gaps and figuring out how we do it and how we move forward. And I would love your feedback on if you're doing anything that you find interesting, if you're making shifts, something is happening. I would love to hear it. And I will see you all next week. Okay. Thank you all so much. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of the day.